There's a specific kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from doing too much. It comes from the quiet. From the moment the noise stops, the people leave, the screen goes dark, and you're left alone with something that has no name. Most people find silence restful, but for some of you, silence is where the loudest things live. And no one ever told you why. You know the feeling. The day is finally over. The tasks are done. You're supposed to rest. But the moment everything quiets down, your mind does the opposite. Thoughts surface like objects rising in still water. Conversations you had 3 years ago. Things you should have said. Things you shouldn't have. Futures that haven't happened yet. Fears dressed up as planning. It's not that you're anxious exactly. It's something more specific than that. It's as if the silence itself is generating sound. Psychologists have studied this. They call it default mode network activation, a web of brain regions that lights up not when you're busy, but when you're not. When external input drops, the brain doesn't go offline, it goes inward. And for some nervous systems, that inward turn is intense, not because something is wrong with you, but because of how your brain was shaped, by sensitivity, by experience, by wiring. Here's something worth sitting with. For most of human history, silence was rare. The brain evolved in a world of constant signal, predators, weather, other people. Silence often meant danger or loss. So the mind learned to fill quiet with its own activity. For some people, this mechanism runs stronger. Researchers in personality psychology point to a trait called sensory processing sensitivity, identified by psychologist Elaine Aron in the 1990s. Highly sensitive people, estimated at around 20% of the population, process information more deeply, not more emotionally, more thoroughly. Their nervous systems extract more data from the environment, which means that when the environment goes quiet, they're still processing everything they absorbed while it was loud. You are not broken. You are a mind that doesn't stop working just because the world stopped talking. Let's go deeper into what's actually happening. Your brain has 2 broad modes. The first is task positive, when you're focused outward, writing, moving, responding, doing. This network suppresses self-referential thinking. The second is the default mode network, when you turn inward. This is the network of memory, imagination, self-reflection, and meaning-making. These 2 systems work like a seesaw. When one goes up, the other comes down. For most people, the seesaw tips easily. Silence arrives, the inward network activates, they drift. It's pleasant, daydreamy. But for people with higher baseline sensitivity or with nervous systems calibrated by early stress, the inward network is simply louder. Think of it this way. Imagine 2 radios. One has standard volume. Silence means the broadcast fades to background hum. The other has amplified reception. Silence just means you can finally hear everything the radio was always playing. The second radio isn't malfunctioning, it's just more sensitive to signal. And that sensitivity, researchers are increasingly clear, is associated with greater creativity, deeper empathy, and more nuanced thinking. The cost is that rest requires more intention, because silence for you is never truly empty. So what do you actually do with this? Not fix it. You don't need to fix what isn't broken. But you can work with your nervous system instead of against it. Here are 5 principles, each grounded in how the brain actually works. Principle 1. Give the mind an anchor. When silence activates the default network, unstructured thought can spiral. Research on attentional anchoring shows that giving the mind a mild, voluntary focus point, a breath, a sound, a single object, reduces rumination without suppressing it. You're not escaping the quiet. You're giving the wave something to brake against. Principle 2. Distinguish processing from looping. Not all inward activity is the same. There's processing, where the mind moves through an experience and arrives somewhere new, and there's looping, where it revisits the same content with no resolution. Psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent decades studying rumination. Her conclusion: the loop isn't a sign of depth, it's a sign of avoidance dressed up as thinking. When you notice the loop, gently redirect, not by suppression, but by changing the question from "why did this happen to me?" to "what does this tell me about what I value?" That shift moves thought from loop to path. Principle 3. Use transition rituals. The brain struggles with abrupt state changes. Going from stimulation to silence is neurologically jarring, especially for sensitive processors. This is why so many people reach for their phones the second things go quiet. Not out of addiction, out of regulation. Instead, build a small bridge. 5 minutes of something gentle, slow movement, dim light, cues it cues. This is called transitional scaffolding in behavioral psychology. You're not avoiding silence, you're entering it gradually. Principle 4. Let some thoughts be heard without being followed. Mindfulness research, particularly the work coming out of Oxford's Mindfulness Center, consistently finds that observing thought is fundamentally different from engaging it. A thought observed has less power. A thought chased becomes an obsession. When a thought arises in silence, try naming it without narrating it. There's the regret thought. There's the planning thought. There's the fear dressed as strategy. The name creates distance. Distance creates choice. Principle 5. Reclaim silence as information. Here is the deepest shift. For many people, the loudness of silence feels like a problem to solve. But the content that surfaces when the world goes quiet, the unprocessed grief, the unmet desire, the unnamed longing, is not noise, it is signal. Existential psychologist Rollo May wrote that anxiety is what we feel when we're being called toward growth, but haven't yet moved. The loudness isn't the enemy, it's the direction. What keeps rising in your silence is probably what needs your attention. Let's bring this together. Imagine the mind as a deep lake. Most people skim across the surface. Their silence is the surface at rest, calm, reflective, undisturbed. But some minds go all the way down, and when the world goes quiet, the depth becomes audible. The currents, the pressure, the things settled at the bottom. That is not pathology. That is the experience of a mind that processes the world at full depth. The goal isn't to become shallow. The goal is to learn to swim in your own water, to anchor, to observe, to transition deliberately, to hear what keeps rising without being pulled under. The silence isn't louder because something is wrong with you. It's louder because you are paying attention, and you always have been. You don't need to be fixed. You need to be understood. By the world, yes, but first by yourself. Your nervous system is not a flaw. It is a feature that came without a manual, and now you have a few more pages. The next time the silence gets loud, don't run from it. Sit at the edge of it. Give it an anchor. Name what rises. Ask what it's pointing toward. Because somewhere in that quiet, past the noise your mind makes when the world stops talking, there is something true about you. Something that only comes forward when everything else falls away. Take care of your mind. It's doing more than you know.